Bobby and I jumped on. We did a show when this was announced last night, but we didn't get takes from Sherrod, Jimmy, and Joe Sway in terms of the Marcus Smart extension. So, guys, we know the deal. 4-year, $77 million extension. That's it. Marcus is your guy. It looks like they consider him part of the future. What that does for the pursuit of any other free agents is going to be a little bit tricky. It doesn't mean they can't, but you're looking at sign and trade options, you're looking sign and trade options or trades to improve your roster along the way. But this is what we got. So, guys, this was reported as something that was in the works a couple weeks ago, so it's not surprising. But now that it's a done deal, what do you think?
I like it. It's transparent. It sends a message. Ime Udoka talked about him being a pillar. Talk about the Celtics putting the money where his mouth is, right?
He had to.
Well, I mean,
no, he did.
Jimmy,
No, he did.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, he did.
You had to show that commitment.
I don't think he had
to. You couldn't have to.
He could have bobbed and waved around that all day long, and nobody would have
go into the season without letting Marcus know that he's going to be the point guard of not only just now but the future. Otherwise, there would have been problems. Come on, guys. Dennis Schroeder's in here. And I'm not saying that
3 expiring point guards.
Hear me out. I'm not buying in on the rumors or whatever, but I mean, if Marcus Smart going into the season not read up, not sure what the future is with Boston, it just would have been a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. This way, you send the message. You're the point guard of this team. We want you to lead this team. If Bradley Beal or someone's available down the road, if that's something that the Celtics can realistically pull off, maybe that happens. But at the end of the day, the Celtics can put all their chips into that basket.
I've never understood that rationale.
Line everything up for Bradley Beal. They just couldn't. They couldn't. And have this bridge year with someone like Marcus. Marcus was never going to buy into that kind of situation.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that I think that none of us are really giving a lot of talk about and thought to is the difference between Brad and Ime and Brad and Danny was that Danny pretty much did whatever the hell he wanted to in terms of the roster and didn't necessarily do it with what's best for Brad in mind. Remember those first couple of years where he was flipping players left and right. That was not in Brad's best interest. In fact, that made Brad's job exponentially harder. I think that's the difference what we're seeing now. The guys that you're starting to see come into the fold are guys that Udoka wants to coach. And I think Brad is making sure that he's getting the type of players that his new coach wants to coach. And Marcus Smart, Udoka has seen enough of Marcus Smart through the years to know that this guy is a dog. This is a guy that is going to help us compete. And right now, we don't have a Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. We don't have the guys in Golden State. We don't have all these super megawatt superstars, but we got a dog who gives us a chance to compete, and we need to keep him in the fold. We can't have him wondering where does he stand with us, and I think that's a big part of why they ponied up, they showed Marcus Smart, they brought the Brinks truck to Marcus Smart.
I think the main reason why they re-signed or they extended Marcus Smart was because that's like the right thing to do based on the way the NBA salary cap is. It makes the most sense to re-sign your players. It gives them value going out of their final year, and it allows you to match salaries. It gives you a player that maybe there's a team that's interested in a player like Marcus Smart, depending on where they are at in their, where they are at and trying to make the playoffs or whatnot. If they want a player like Marcus Smart who can maybe provide some sort of leadership, if that's what they think he's valuable with, or provide some sort of defense. So you turn a guy who's going to be a free agent into a guy who's got 4 more years on his deal. Well, now the team if you are interested in trading him, now a team on the other end is saying, okay, well, we know we don't have to worry about this guy leaving us immediately. So I think that was the smart thing to do from an NBA standpoint. It doesn't necessarily mean to me that, the Celtics see Marcus Smart on their team for the next 5 years.
Yeah, but Jimmy, I've heard the notion that they're stuck with him now, and this keeps floating around. If that doesn't come to pass, I think everybody agrees that the trade aspect of it was good. If it doesn't come to pass, that he ends up in a deal that they acquire someone by adding him. I don't know if he's a third pillar type player, but he's a really good player who deserves the salary, I think, and he's going to come to prove that.
I think deserve doesn't have anything to do with it. This is the problem, and again, this is where the conversation gets muddy for people. Everyone's like, Marcus is worth $20 million. Fine, maybe somewhere else. The question is, does it make sense for the Celtics given the rest of their roster composition and whatever?
But that's not Smart's problem.
It's not his problem. That's not the point. the reason people are questioning the wisdom of the signing is, does it make sense for the Celtics in whatever direction they're going to go? Does it give them maximum flexibility to be able to get better, or does it make them better? Does it do either of those two things? And that's the only question. Too many people are spending money saying this guy got 20, so Marcus deserves it. That's not the issue. The issue is, was it smart for the Celtics to sign him? And that's what we're discussing. That's what
and I think when you talk about what he signed for, that's when you can say, okay, well, what other players are around that money, and say, okay, is this a quote unquote tradable contract? Because remember, a couple years ago, people were talking about what's his name in Indy and how it's an untradeable contract. He's making way too much money for what he's worth, and we talk about Ben Simmons, Oladipo, the big guy, the Turner.
You talking about Miles Turner?
I'm talking about Turner. Yeah. People talk about Simmons and how his contract is just outrageous and untradeable. I don't think Marcus Smart's contract is untradeable. So in that sense, I'm not like upset about it. But kind of what John's saying is like, okay, well, we know what Marcus Smart is good at. We know what he's done for this team and what he hasn't been able to do for this team. And now you're kind of bringing the band back together here. Are you doing it because you think they are going to be good enough to, win a championship, because that is the goal? Or are you doing it because you want to keep your options open and have tradable contracts and tradable assets and be able to match salaries and all that stuff? So I think it's a little bit of both. By extending him, they aren't getting worse. And theoretically, they would get worse if he just walked. We've seen it happen too many times over the last few years.
Unless you take that money.
That's the real thing you're trying to prevent here.
Unless you take that money and sign it. But we know that they can't strip the entire – we've been over this, I think, to the point where it's like they would have to literally get rid of everybody except Tatum and Brown and like –
It's less that, and it's more, Jimmy, it's not – I agree. I think they did this to hedge, because if they can't sign somebody big next year and they lose another talented player like Smart because they didn't re-sign him, then you're getting worse. Could you have invested that $20 million into something else that makes you better than Marcus Smart makes you? That's the question.
Here's the question.
I don't know that. Yeah.
Here's the question we asked in March. Would you rather have Smart right now for, what's it going to be, 18, 19, or Gordon for 2021? Because that's what we're talking about here. Like, the interchangeability for Smart is a guy like Aaron Gordon. Like, we can dream all we want about him packaging up to a bigger star, but you're basically going to get a player who's about the same as Smart or worse at that position if you end up moving on from him. Like, that's just how it goes. You don't really package guys up. A guy like Smart especially, you either get the same thing or worse. So,
Fournier,
Fournier
got 4 and 78. He basically got the same deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
John brought this up. John brought this up at the end of the show, Josue, and I did say this during the year. Like, if it comes down to Smart or Fournier, I was leaning Fournier a little bit.
You were, I disagree with that, because I just think when it comes to checking those boxes, I mean, you line them up compared to other options that the Celtics had. Marcus Smart wins it. He checks those boxes in the sense of, one, he's in his prime. Two, he continues to get better, especially for what he's positioned to do, which is, of course, be the point guard of this team.
So I'm not sure that's a
– well, passing numbers were he –
I want to push back on that narrative a tad.
That role, but he showed a lot of promise there, and especially, on the defensive side of things, I think that he's going to turn things up a notch in the sense that he has Richardson.
He needs to get back to being the defender he was before.
His numbers went up.
His defensive background and what he brings to this team, I just think it all makes sense again.
Yeah, so his numbers went up a little bit because of necessity, usage.
No, I get that.
But at the end of the day, his 3-point percentage went down. His overall field goal percentage was again under 40, which it is for his career. He is, this isn't hyperbole, he is one of the 2 or 3 worst volume shooters in the league. It's a fact. It just is. For a man, he shot almost 6 threes a game. There's nobody with a lower percentage who shot more threes, I don't think, or maybe one other player in the league who shot that many or more with a lower percentage. He's a horrible shooter. Okay, and so that's not
necessity though. So that skews those numbers.
It is, and what I said in the show, and what I'll say here is Marcus Smart. I believe Ime has planted seeds along the way of. We're going to put the ball in his hands. He's going to be a point guard. The Marcus Smart contract to me, and again, it is almost you can't write it into the contract. You can't shoot 10 threes, but it really is contingent upon him embracing a totally new role with this team and one that he hasn't had. He's going to have to be better to earn that money. Where he is now is fine, but I don't think he's exceptional, and I don't think he's a $20 million guy. And as soon as you start talking about Smart, when you have to immediately start talking about intangibles and leadership, that's a way that you're trying to convince yourself that it was worth it. He can earn it if he turns himself into a pass-first distributing point guard who's playing intense defense, every single second that he's out there. But this version of Smart, if he goes out there and sometimes decides he wants to shoot a ton and sometimes decides and he kind of plays it, the way he wants to play it, he's going to be a frustrating player. And people will start questioning whether it was, a great deal. I think he has to evolve. I think he's got to be better. I think he's got to be a different version of himself.